Hi. Thank you for attending today's reading. Let's begin. A gay man who sexually harassed me taught me as a straight male how not to treat women. 9 comments. Share. Save. Hide. Report. 90% upvoted. End of story. Next story. So, 6th grade was interesting. Okay, so at my school when you're done with lunch you would go outside for outside time. This is when the story starts. So one of my friends go outside. I go outside a few minutes later, then I see my friend getting jumped. I try to break up the fight. But it was time to go back inside. The next day comes and I brought my friends and they brought their friends. We agreed on a time, place, and how much people will be fighting. There was no limit on how much people would be fighting, and it happened outside after lunch. On the day of the fight there was not 1, not 2, not 3, not 10 but 60 people in the fight. I go for the person that jumped my friend and I grabbed him and put him in a headlock, and threw him, and I probably blacked out because I don't remember what came after that. People that I grabbed his arms and made him punch himself, and others said I stepped on his head, but after that I returned to reality. I saw teachers, so I screamed, "Teachers!" And I swear it looked like that one scene from Ratatouille when the humans walk into the kitchen and see the rats cooking. Everybody just ran. And yeah, this all happened in 6th grade. End of story. Next story. Just found out that I have an aunt that I never knew existed. This literally just happened 10 minutes ago. My mom just told me about an aunt who is the love child of my grandfather and another woman. My grandfather was a well-respected man and he had 2 children with my grandmother, my dad and my uncle. I could not have imagined that he would cheat on my grandmother. Anyway, she was born in 1991 and was the result of my grandfather's affair with another woman whom I must admit is way more attractive than my nan. My nan was aware of this, but she disowned her due to her being an indication of my grandfather's affair. 4 years later, in 1995, my grandfather died due to complications from liver disease. Before he died, he sent my aunt's family a little money so that her mother could look after her. She grew up without a father figure and only had her mother and grandmother for support. Fast forward 20 years to 2011, my dad and my uncle found her on Facebook and came to visit and finally accepted her as their half-sister. She took on her mother's surname as she had no father. She is now doing pretty well working in Japan as an architect. She told my mom that I should consider a career in Japan. I'm 16M. But I was skeptical because I had never met this woman in my life and still haven't met her. But she is my family. My grandmother is unaware that we have reconnected with her. She might as well have forgotten that my aunt had even existed. End of story. Next story. I'm the quiet kid. I discovered me and my history teacher like the same show, so in my history class, I tend to sit there quietly, only talking to the people on my table. I rarely answer questions and keep my hood up, mask on and headphones playing music. I also sit right next to the teacher's desk. So the other day, he comes up to our table. He likes to walk around and see how everyone is doing with the task. And he's talking to us. I'm listening but not really speaking up, as usual. Then he tells someone else on my table to focus, as a joke, stating, "Go to your mind palace." Instinctively, I say, I need to go to my mind palace, in what can only be described as a near-perfect impression of Benedict Cumberbatch. Mind Palace is a reference to the BBC show Sherlock. The thing I said was a quote stated by Sherlock, played by Benedict. People on my table went quiet, and I looked up briefly at my teacher. He smiled at me amusedly. Something that never really happens. I returned to the task and he carried on talking. Only the two of us knowing what we referenced. End of story. Next story. This is why I don't talk to people. So when I was 12 in 6th grade, one got accused of telling this girl I liked that I was gonna rape her, and then I got called over by the principals and she was just standing there looking at me having a panic attack. Years later I just realized it's because her best friend. I broke up with her and she was pissed, and I liked the girl who said the BS about me, but there was so many people getting on my ass and I just couldn't do it, so I started just not talking to anyone. She still hates me and she's with my fucking best friend and I don't even know why she did it. Over a girl that I was with. That shit is serious and I can't tell you how terrified I felt, and I couldn't even fucking believe she could say something about that to me, and that's why I didn't FW them. End of story. Next story. I cheated in a bike race. And I will never regret it. I grew up in a small neighborhood in Mississippi, somewhere between rural and small town. My mom worked a couple of jobs to pay rent on a small 3-bedroom house with my stepfather. And I was the oldest of 3. Things were going okay. It was the late 90s and summer, and my mother had saved up enough money to buy me a mountain bike for my 11th birthday. There weren't exactly mountains in the Delta, but we made it work with dirt trails built into abandoned construction sites and creek beds in the dry season, etc. Now, I was quiet but scrappy, and liked to hang around the teenagers because I wanted to be taken seriously. There were 2 older boys in this group that, in hindsight, were absolute psychopaths, the kind only backwater boredom can breed. They decided rather quickly that they wanted my new bike. They were the kind to borrow a younger kid's ride and return it in pieces. I was so damned proud of mine that I wouldn't them touch it. I refused to leave it in the yard, much to my mom's exasperation. Pretty sure I parked it in my closet for the first week or 2. They eventually spotted me on it and challenged me to a race. These guys were 15 and 16, easily a foot taller than me. I knew it was a slim chance of an actual win. But I also got to pick the track. I chose the service road, uphill around a small man-made lake at the end of my cove. I knew it terminated in a dead end and some shrubs. But there was a short path to the paved road through the trees that I knew about, and they didn't. On the way, they were lagging behind and muttering about how stupid I was. They could just jump me at the end of the track and take it by force. I knew they were serious. I still have scars from a few rounds with these guys to this day. My plan was to skirt off at the last second, hit the main road downhill and book it home. We square up at the mouth of the road. One of them calls 3. And off we go. He pulls ahead pretty quickly despite the potholes and mud. We're halfway down when I catch up and he realizes I'm gaining on him. His brother is trailing behind at a more leisurely pace. With about 20 yards between us, I pull up level with him at the uphill. And I'd only gained maybe an inch on him at this point when he looks over and spits at me. He follows it with, "I'm gonna knock your $% hash it and teeth out, little girl." I'd never been so incensed in my short life. Friends. I had this moment of clarity where I realized several things at once. This bully never wanted my bike. He wanted to hurt me. He was afraid of losing to the local tomboy. In front of his brother. No less. Even if I won, he would try to take my bike. Even if I lost, he was going to beat me within an inch of my life for the 2nd or 3rd time. And I was over it. I hit the brake just enough to fall back. level with him, watching him grin, proud of how he'd scared me. And I planted my foot in his thigh and kicked him off the hill into the lake. I didn't watch him go. I turned off into the woods in the opposite direction because I knew his brother would go after him. It wasn't a straight drop. He rolled about 15 feet and hit the water tangled up in his bike. He ended up with a twisted ankle and a loose tooth, and couldn't walk straight for weeks. But he didn't get my bike. I regret nothing. End of story. That is all for today. If you want to support my automated channel, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.